So the universe has a funny way of getting your attention, especially when your life is comfortable, like mine was. So I was a freelance television producer. I made a decent living, and I enjoyed the privileges that a career in entertainment brings. Of all the different kinds of stories that I produced, the ones that are some of my all-time favorites are makeovers. So you know those kinds of shows, right? Here's Sally before, now check out Sally after, right? And as Sally would strut across that stage, you would see a light in her come on, and Sally would be shining. I lived for those moments. I lived for the moment when someone saw their new image and they let go of their outdated selves and embraced who they could be. A simple transformation with hair, makeup, and clothing helped that person see possibilities that were there all the time. So doing those shows, I started to wonder about the unseen possibilities in myself. And so I started to get that nagging feeling, is this all there is? So as soon as I asked that question, I got a call for my next job. And it was to tell a story, and that story would transform my life. It was a feature story about 4 mothers who had lost their children to inner city violence. Their innocent children to inner city violence. So my first stop was a candlelight vigil created for some children, about 50 kindergartners, whose teacher had been murdered in front of their school. As the balloons were released, those children began to uncontrollably wail. There were not enough adults around to comfort all of those kids, so my crew and I, we started scooping up kids to try to ease the pain, their pain and ours. My next stop, late morning, I was interviewing Dee, a mother whose daughter, a 20-year-old college student, had been murdered. We watched as she placed flowers and an ocean of tears on her only child's grave. I said to myself, Yvette, just breathe. I was drained by that time, and it was only lunchtime. We wrapped our shoot that day at the site of a candlelight vigil. We arrived about 45 minutes after the crime had been committed. The trauma of it all was still thick in the air. Mothers of murdered children within minutes organized a candlelight vigil. And so as the circle formed and neighbors poured onto the yard, and one person lit the candle of the next, there were testimonies on behalf of those that died and lots of tears. But some in that circle did not cry. I saw them choke down their tears. I was standing next to a guy like that. As our wicks touched to light our candles, I could see that his light was totally turned out. I could feel his pain, the pain beneath his stare. So the neighbor said, well, you know, it's a shame, but that's just how life is. Tomorrow, it could be me and mine that end up like this. No, nobody cares when you live where we do. This is not going to wind up on the news. And that night, there were no news crews. There was no big public outcry. The neighbors just blew out their candles and they went home. But why? Were we living in this communal thought that this is just the way it is? Had waiting in a sea of low expectations become normal? When you live in the hood, do you just have to suck it up, grin, and bear it? And then a light came on for me. When your pain, your conditions and your potential is not recognized, that says to me, you better figure out a way to do it yourself. That waiting for a policy or a person is not the answer. We are the answers that we seek. So I began to think about these questions. So what if we turned part of our attention away from what's wrong in inner city neighborhoods and shifted part of that attention to what's right and placed laser focus on that? What if we found more ways to tap this endless reservoir of talent? If we created a pipeline for people to see the highest and the best in themselves and let them contribute from that place, no matter what their zip code might be. Before that life-altering day, I had convinced myself that telling stories on TV was my way to make a difference. Well, after that day, it was no denying my world had permanently shifted. I became obsessed with these questions. My career had been about the power of story. So I started with an idea that we now teach our students. Start where you are with what you have. Okay, I have my ability to tell a story, but now what? The answer came from one of the courageous moms I covered in that story. She was working with ex-offenders trying to help them land jobs, but the trouble was, when an employer saw what they looked like, when they saw how they were dressed, they would hire someone else. So with a loving push from my husband, he and I started a nonprofit called Urban Possibilities that initially focused on helping inner city job seekers dress for interviews. So producing makeovers had taught me an essential truth. When you change what someone looks like, it can begin to change what they believe about themselves. And that was the gold that we were after. So to deepen the experience, we created an empowerment curriculum, a success toolkit, and that grew out of a few key ideas. The first, your history does not determine your destiny, but your thinking surely does. Second, when you live through life's worst, you earn great assets, the hard-to-get kind, like resilience and courage and strength. And that's powerful fuel for a future. And last, find your talent, create a vision for your life, get to work, and be of service. To help our students integrate these ideas deep into their psyche, we added an art and a performance component to our work. Writing, public readings, and theater programs in shelters on Skid Row. And we saw our adult students, veterans, ex-offenders, ex-addicts, take our classes, take the stage, and take flight. Right from the start, students started to achieve what the goals they were setting in the class. They started reuniting with their families, enrolling in school, landing jobs. As they rediscovered their voices, they began to walk different, talk different, live different. And I learned that my notion of people on Skid Row was all wrong. They were from all races and backgrounds. Some were raised in poverty on pretty mean streets, and some were spiraled out of their comfortable lives by financial loss, by bad health, and just a run of bad luck. One of our first students was an Air Force veteran. He was a former homeowner. He was a father of 4 and a former middle manager who had a heart condition. He had been homeless on Skid Row for 7 years. In our program, he started a novel, and 14 months later, that novel was published. So I've been threatening to write a book for about, 10 years, 12 years, and I'm still on my outline. But for Michael Douglas Gray, his talent helped him to literally write himself off Skid Row. There were days that he could not eat, but there was never a day that he did not write. Among our students, we've had a CPA, a real estate broker, we've had a forensic photographer, a restaurant owner, and people in the entertainment business just like me. Our students have turned this teacher into a grateful pupil, showing me without a doubt that there is a sea of untapped potential in inner city communities, that the human spirit is incredibly resilient, and no matter how dire the circumstances, there is unlimited potential waiting to be set free. My students have taught me that the high cost of poverty is not just the drain on city services or the loss of your job, your house, or your car. The most important thing you lose when you lose everything is that you lose your belief in yourself, in your worthiness. And regaining that worthiness is ground zero to rebuild your life. Empowering how a person feels about themselves is imperative, because when you change how we feel in here, it shows up out here. And what we think about ourselves and what it's possible for us to achieve determines everything. In our program, we believe that living through life's toughest challenges is a heroic act. It builds resilience, fortitude, and grit. If you've ever been through tough times, then you know what I mean. It's our struggles that teach us our biggest lessons and build our character. Right under our noses, on street corners, in missions and shelters, in our Skid Row and communities like it, there is a treasure of talent with tough muscles that can help strengthen and heal our communities, our cities, and our souls. This is our distinct competitive advantage. During my journey, one of my favorite lessons has to do with transformation, because when someone speaks their truth, it can also reawaken the voice of the listener. If your heart is open, transformation is catching. And when people come to our shows, they often come thinking they're there to support the students. But when they leave, they are inspired with a new perspective about their own hidden potential. Watching students courageously step into a new future or take the stage makes me more fearless. Using my talents to help other people find theirs has revealed to me talents I never knew I had, and given my life a richness that's unrecognizable from my life before. So it's my mission that we look at what a comeback requires with an open mind and see that the road to self-sufficiency is better traveled when you feel worthy of the trip. That yes, we need all the services in the continuum of care, housing, jobs, and supportive services. But we also need to invest in helping people believe in themselves again and establish a vision for their life that engages their imagination, ignites their passion, and pulls them forward. My dream is that the world begin to see people who live in communities like our Skid Row not as a problem, but as an opportunity. Effecting change is not about fixing them. It's about capitalizing on the power of we, how we embrace our common humanity, and how we value one simple but profound fact. Our transcendence is tied together. Our greater strength as a nation will come when we learn to respect, honor, and tap into all the urban possibilities that are waiting for us. So it's my sincere wish that we begin to reach down deep and not only harness the power of inner city potential, but also in ourselves, that we move past our self-imposed boundaries, because understanding ourselves and our connectedness helps to end human suffering and creates a safer place where all of our lights can shine brighter together. Thank you.